Hi guys, welcome to another video from Flight Sim Academy. Today we're going to be looking at the FMC pre-flight sequence on the Boeing 787-10. This is a 787 that comes with the new flight simulator with the Premium Deluxe 5-star edition. So I've already selected the airplane, and now I'm going to select the departure airfield of London Stansted. Once I've chosen London Stansted, you get the option to choose where you depart from, be it from the runway threshold ready for departure, which gives you the engines running and everything powered up, or if you choose a stand, you get the aircraft what we call cold and dark. This is the aircraft all powered down, and you have to go through the pre-flight sequence to start it up, do some procedures and checks and checklists, and then start the engines. So that's what we're going to go through today. For the arrival airport, I'm going to choose Frankfurt, Main. Now, when you do this, it gives you the option to choose the arrival runway. What you have to do now is change the flight from a VFR flight to an IFR flight. And when you choose an IFR flight, you get the option to choose low-level airways or high-level airways. Because of the distance today, we're choosing the high-altitude airways. Now, once you choose the high-altitude airways, Flight Simulator chooses the optimum route for you, and then that becomes your flight plan. That's got all the airways in and all the points. And also, when you choose IFR high-altitude airways, you then get the option of choosing the departure. So from London Stansted, I've chosen the Clacton 1 Echo, just because I know it goes in the right direction, and the Unuco arrival of the 25 Centre, and then the IRS 25 Centre in Frankfurt. So guys, we've been dropped off at the aircraft. It's looking like a very good impression of London Stansted Airport. We're at the stand number 2 that we talked about at the flight planning section in Flight Simulator. So what we do in real life is once we get dropped off by the bus, we have an assessment of the aircraft from the outside. Now, we're not talking about the exterior inspection or a walk around. We're just trying to have a look at the status of the aircraft. So the first thing we'll notice is if there's a fueler there, whether fueling has started or whether fueling is finished or the fueler hasn't turned up already. We'll have a look at how much cargo is to be loaded. As you can see, there's none of that happening in the picture. We also, more importantly, don't have any electrical connections, any ground power connected to the aircraft. So when we do get on board, we're going to have to start the APU. We also don't have any ground crew, and we don't have any passengers to help us get ready for departure. Normally, then, once we've had a look at that, we will board the aircraft from the back, from the L4 or L5 doors, depending on which aircraft we're flying. I'll make our way down to the cockpit, and then we'll be presented with the cold and dark aircraft. So once you change your view, this is the cold and dark aircraft. Obviously, it's not so dark because I changed it to a day scene. But as you can see, this is what we mean. Everything is turned off. Everything is unpowered. So it's our job now to prepare the aircraft. First thing we do once we get into the cockpit is that the captain will check the aircraft technical log, or sometimes called the tech log, and we'll see if there's any defects in here, if there's any allowable defects, or is there any MEL restrictions or CDL restrictions that will affect us that we haven't noticed again at the planning stage. Ideally, we would have had this information sent to us before we leave, before we start our planning. But we do, the official documents are the aircraft documents. So likewise, conversely, sometimes some defects that we planned on by the time we arrive at the aircraft have been fixed. So the captain will go through that. We'll check the gear pins are all in the right place, and there's a few security checks to be done, and a little bit of cross communication with the ground crew. In real life, we would probably call for a ground team and some ground power. But in simulator life, we do have a before start checklist. Now, this is a very basic checklist. There's a few things on it that we need to do before we can start the engines. Just having a look at the overhead panel here. A lot of the switches are in op. Of course, this is a study level simulator. But most of the switches have been left in the on or auto position. Normally, it would be our job to put these in the correct position and then power up the aircraft. If you pull up the aircraft checklist, it gives you a very rough guide, a very brief guide, and assumes everything else has already been done. So before we can have a look at the FMC, we need to power up the aircraft. So looking at the checklist that we have on Microsoft Flight Simulator, we've got to turn the battery on, start the APU, and then put the APU generator switches on the bus. Once we've done that, we'll have AC power to our aircraft, and then we can start loading the FMC and preparing it. You'll see that the before starting engine checklist from Flight Simulator. You power up the aircraft up to APU, generator switches, and then you put the fuel pumps on, the beacon on, and then you're ready to start the engines. In real life, there's a lot more to go through, and I'll point that out to you as we get to it. But now we've powered up the aircraft, we can start to have a look at the FMC. Right, so once those AC power steps are complete, I'll ask you to turn the beacon on, and then that would be a good point to have a look down at the FMC. This is what you're presented with once the AC power is put on the aircraft. Just get rid of that checklist there. And you can see our TV screens, our CDUs as they're called. They've all come to life. So here we are, guys, at the FMC area. We're going to have a quick look at this. So it may look a little bit different to those you may have seen on the 747 or 777, for example. These are new models. We have a big TV screen in the middle. The CDU section, the screen section of the FMC, looks very much the same. It's just superimposed onto the TV screen. The FMC menu buttons, they're all click buttons through the cursor. But obviously in Flight Simulator, we just click through them or click through the screen with our mouse. The input buttons are over on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side of the first officer's one. Usually they were below it. Now you'll notice that we've got two FMCs like in the real aircraft, but the one on the right is the first officer's one, and through much exploration I've noticed the one on the right-hand side is just for decoration. Yes, you see the cyan bits? These mean to us in Flight Simulator they're not clickable, they're not active yet. I don't know if there's plans to make them active later on in any further updates of Flight Simulator. But this pause in it button, for example, this one is grey, that means it can be clicked. As mentioned before, we'll just be using the one on the left hand side. The one on the right hand side will stay on the ident page. Now these buttons on the left of the screen that I'm highlighting for you, these are called the line select keys. These are called the L1, 2, 3, all the way down to L6 key, and the R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, and R6 keys. We use these to make various selections in the FMC. Okay guys, this is the ident page. This is the page that we're presented with on the FMC when we power up the aircraft. So our normal pre-flight procedures are to check on here that everything is correct. Just going through this then, we've got the model 787-10, that's the correct aircraft. We've got the nav database in here. This has to be up to date. The software level, sometimes the software in the FMC is updated overnight, and sometimes the engineers have to come along and update it depending on the service intervals of the aircraft and the release from any software from Boeing. So we have to check these are all up to date. Normally we get a list of all of the software databases that we have to have present on board, so we usually go ahead and check them. The drag and the drag factor and the fuel flow factor, these are dependent on the aircraft, and we usually check these. These are kind of percentage adjustments we need to make to the drag of the aircraft and to the fuel burn of the aircraft, so that we have very accurate figures in our flight management computer. These are given to us and we normally just verify them here. Obviously in the Flight Simulator this option isn't available to us yet. The engines, the type of engines, we just have to verify them. Sometimes we have different engines, and they obviously have to be programmed differently in the FMC. The nav database, obviously this gets modified daily or weekly sometimes, and we have to check that we've got the up-to-date with all of the amendments that have been released. And the operational data, not really sure what that means, whether that's company specific or not. Haven't really seen that one before. So once we've checked that page, we can just go on to the next page. So you can see the R6 pause in it button. That always leads us on to the next thing that needs to be done. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and that's going to take us to the pause in it. Once we're on the position initialization page, there's a few things for us to enter. You'll see I'm still hovering over the R6 line select key where it says route. That would be the next page for us to click on once we've populated this page. So every time during the pre-flight sequence you're not sure where you are, if you look in the R6 line select key, it might have another page for you to fill out. Okay, so on the position initialization page, you'll see it says reference airport, and it's got 4 squares here. Squares mean the information has to be entered. Dashes mean the information is optional. So I then have to get the ICAO code for London Stansted, Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, and put that in the ref airport section. You'll see the other boxes that need to be filled out are the set IRS position. So you'll see also we have some more information here that could be filled out with dashes, gate number and heading and UTC time. All of these don't need to be filled out. This is just used by the IRS, the inertial reference systems, when you're aligning them just to make it faster. What we normally do, the Boeing policy on this is just to use the most accurate position. You'll see here, this is GPS position. This is what's calculated from the GPS on the aircraft. we take this position, we line select it down to the scratch pad, and then we put it in the set IRS position. And that's all we need to do. That's the most accurate way of starting the alignment of the IRSs. So I've just brought it down to the scratch pad there. And then to put it in the boxes, I just line select with the R5 key. So once that's been set in, the IRSs will begin alignment. Normally, when the IRSs are not aligned, we won't have any attitude information or any map information. So just having a look at this here, this is something that Flight Simulator isn't quite accurate with. So we've already got the attitude information, we've already got the artificial horizon on our primary flight display and our map display. Normally, this wouldn't be here. Okay, so the position initialization page has now been filled out. If you look in the bottom right, the R6 line select key, the next page to fill out is the route page. To go back, you click on index on the L6 page, and that will bring you up to the index of all of the pages. We don't need to do that just yet, but if you do get lost, the index page, if you have the option for it, is a good way to get back to the beginning. So guys, welcome to the route page. This is a route 1 page, and we also have the option for a route 2 page. So we're able in the normal plane to program one route in the route 1 section and one route in the route 2 section. You'll see on the line select keys, the L6 key route 2 is how you would normally get on it. Obviously that's cyan, that's disabled in this version of Flight Sim. Look at the top of the page, it always tells you what page you're on. It says RTE1, that means route 1. And this has been preloaded from the flight planner for us, from Flight Simulator from Stansted, Frankfurt. The runway in use for 22, and the flight number, this would be your call sign. This is what ATC reads you as, and this will be company specific. Sometimes what you do in real life is press send or request it, and then you get the uplink from Datalink, and then you will have, that will take a minute, and the flight operations department will then send you the route to your FMC. It takes a few minutes for that to happen once you load it and you confirm it and then you execute it. And then you have to check it as well. Not quite in that order, you should probably check it before you execute it. Okay guys, before we move on to the next page, performance initialization, we're just going to check the route, and that's incorrectly. So it's from Stansted to Frankfurt from runway 22. Flight number in, that is our call sign, that's the one ATC call us by. Now if you press the next page, you'll go on to route page number 2. It's still route 1, but page 2 out of 4, as you can see from the top line. And it's got a Clacton 1 Echo departure here, just highlighting that there for you. Clacton 1 Echo departure to Clacton, and then it's got direct to Tebra, and then we have the airways and the points where we change airways, and we normally just go through this, make sure it matches our actual flight plan, because sometimes the navigation waypoints, the airways get updated or changed overnight, or you could have the wrong one sent to you by operations, so we do have to go ahead and check that. Now on page 4, you'll see the flight plan finishes at Landler. Normally, we should see an arrival and an approach in here in Frankfurt. It should go to Landler, then be the arrival, then the ILS 25 center, and then that should be the end of the route. I think this is not yet finished by Microsoft. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, in the comments, but I've tried playing around with it. I've tried reloading the approaches and changing the route, and unfortunately, every time I do that, it seems that the flight plan terminates at the last en route waypoint. But if you can check you have the full route in your plan, you can do that a couple of ways. So the first way, you can try and reload the departure arrival. If you click on the departure arrival key, it gives you the chance to reload the arrival at your destination. We can see here we've already got selected the ILS 25 and the correct arrival and transition already selected. So we don't need to reselect them. For some reason there's a bit of a bug in the system here, in that it doesn't show you on your route page. You can also have a look at the navigation display. It's possible to put that into map mode and have a look ahead and see if your pink line or your magenta line looks correct. So what I'm going to do, guys, is load up the navigation display on the inner DU. I'm going to move the ND mode selector to plan mode, or click on that even, and that gives us the top down aka plan mode of our route. We've got the airport diagram there and the pink line or magenta line that's showing us our route. At the moment it's showing us Stansted, our Clacton departure, which is straight ahead, and then a left hand turn en route. But one really good thing what you can do with the FMC, we use that every day, is we put it in plan mode, as you can see, and then if you go to the legs page, you can actually step through all of the active waypoints. And if I do that for you now, if I go to the legs page there, it starts off at Stansted, and these are all the points on the departure. So I just need to step through those one by one to check that we have a complete route in the system. Once again, this has all been done for us by Flight Simulator, but it is our job as pilots to check it. We don't want to get to Frankfurt and then start flying into somebody else's airspace. If you've got the nav display in plan mode, you can also change the range or the scale of the nav display, so you can start to look ahead on your route. Once you're in next page, you can also use next page or previous page to skip ahead if you don't want to do it point by point. And if you look here, I skipped all the way ahead and made my range as big as possible so I can look at the picture or the planned route when we get to Frankfurt. I'm just reducing that range now, and as you can see, it's got the full RNAV arrival for ILS 25 Center in Frankfurt. Just stepping through them individually, but I'm happy enough for that. Of course, when we do get to Frankfurt, we'll be expecting radar vectors, and it'll be our job to update it as we go. There we are, there's the final point, runway 25 Center in Frankfurt. Right guys, once we're happy with that, we can move on to the next page, which is the performance initialization page or perf init page. This page has details of our weights, cost index, our fuel, etc. Now, these final figures need to be entered in here once all of our passengers have been confirmed, and we're given a load sheet from our dispatcher or load control team. Then we know how heavy we are, and we can start to make some takeoff calculations. In this example, we have a zero fuel weight, which is on the L3 key, of 149.3. We got 121 pounds of fuel on board, and that gives us a total of 450 pounds for takeoff. I'm not sure why, but the zero fuel weight is in kilos, the fuel is in pounds, and the gross weight is also in pounds. You can see these figures are given to us by Flight Simulator. Normally we would enter them ourselves. The reserves is the amount of fuel we need to keep in the reserves for our calculation purposes. This usually consists of final reserve fuel and diversion fuel. I'm just going to put in 20. I don't know if it's tons or pounds at this point. I haven't really got that far into the FMC yet. You also get the option to choose your cruising level. Today I'm going to choose flight level 250 and the cruise CG. This usually comes from our load sheet. The next page is the thrust limit page. So you then run a calculation based on your iPad or your onboard performance tool and work out how much thrust you need for takeoff. Once you have decided on that, this is the page which you would enter it in. You see in the top left corner you have an option to choose a temperature, and you have a little bit along from that in the middle at the top, the outside air temperature. Now this is an assumed temperature method, an ATM. You can reduce the amount of takeoff thrust your engines produce at takeoff by lying to the computer. You lie to the computer and you tell it it's 50 degrees outside or it's 20 degrees outside instead of the actual temperature of 14 degrees. What this does, because the air is thinner, is it provides you with less thrust. You then have to choose on the left hand side which value of takeoff thrust you would like. TO being full takeoff thrust, TO1 is a reduction of 10%, TO2 a reduction of 20%, and takeoff TOB, which is takeoff bump if you need a little bit more thrust. On the right hand side is where you select the initial climb thrust for after takeoff. Normally when you've selected this here, it will give you an N1 value which you read up on the thrust mode annunciator. But unfortunately in the simulator this feature is not yet available. Alright guys, once you've chosen your correct takeoff thrust and compared it with your colleague, you are then complete. The next page is the takeoff page. Now this should give you a result in the top left hand corner of the flaps for takeoff. I think this is a fault in the software at the moment. It's saying our flaps for takeoff are 129 knots. Now there should just be a takeoff flap setting, be it 5, 10, 15 or 20. We also have an option here of adjusting the thrust reduction altitude. This is when your takeoff thrust reduced to your climb thrust, which you selected on your previous page. Also, you have your V-speeds, which are given to you from the computer on the right-hand side. Today we have a V2 of 189 knots. So there you have it guys, once you've done your takeoff performance and your FMC pre-flight, that is complete. You have a V2 there of 189. And that has to be set in the MCP speed window in case of an engine failure after takeoff. And most companies will too also set the MCP at the calculated V2 speed. So guys, that's the pre-flight procedure up until the end of the FMC. After this point, there'll be various briefings and checklists. Stay tuned for more. I hope you found this enjoyable. Please let us know your thoughts and feedback in the comments, and we hope to see you in the skies soon. Thank you.